When you think of Epcot, what ride do you think of? Most of you probably said Spaceship Earth or maybe Cosmic Rewind, but personally I think of Test Track, and also Spaceship Earth, but that's beside the point. Test Track is so interesting to me because of the multiple versions over the years, and this may be recency bias, but Test Track 3.0 is one of my favorite rides at the Walt Disney World Resort, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, let's take a look back on the previous two versions of Test Track. Alright, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel where I talk about all things theme park related, but mostly Disney. Today's subject is of course Test Track, starting with Test Track 1.0. Test Track 1.0 opened in March of 1999 and was sponsored by General Motors, who still sponsor the ride to this day. However, during the 2.0 era, they shifted their focus to Chevrolet, which General Motors owns, but we'll get to that later. GM also sponsored the World of Motion, which is the ride that was here before Test Track, and there is plenty of references to the World of Motion on all three versions of Test Track. Anyway, enough backstory, let's find out what it was like to take a ride on Test Track. Before you even enter the queue, you can see the track overhead with cars flying by. It's an awesome design that gets you pumped up before even getting in line. Upon entering the queue, you'll notice that the theming is very industrial and factory-like, with car parts everywhere and disassembled vehicles. You can see different tests being performed on cars and test dummies with accompanying videos to display the tests in action. You then enter the pre-show area, which to be honest, I forgot even existed because it's absent in newer versions of the ride, and I was like 8 years old when I rode this thing. But anyway, the pre-show basically just explains all the tests you're going to perform on your ride vehicle. Nothing too special, but it has its charm and feels very old school Epcot. After the pre-show, you make your way to the station where you board your ride vehicle. But before that, I would like to mention that we just hit 500 subscribers, and I want to thank you all so much for subscribing. If you like what you've seen so far and you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Alright, so upon boarding your ride vehicle, you will notice the 3 across seating with 2 rows. If you've been on Radiator Springs Racers over in California, it's the exact same ride system, that being a high-speed dark ride, but not a roller coaster. Many mistake this for a roller coaster, but it is just in fact a dark ride. It's actually the fastest ride at Walt Disney World, which is crazy because again, it's not a roller coaster. But anyway, you board your ride vehicle, fasten your seatbelts, and you're off. Another interesting thing about this ride is the fact that the seatbelt check is after the ride gets moving. It's in a different spot than the station, and there's a couple rides that do that. Space Mountain and Dinosaur come to mind, but this feels weird because it's a bit further than the other rides I just mentioned. You pull up to the first test, and that is the hill climb test, where you make your way up a pretty steep slope. The test is successful, but this is really just to put you in the show building. You now move on to the suspension test with bumps and potholes in the road to see how the car performs on rough surfaces. Next is the brake test, where you speed up on a straight path and quickly slow down to brake. You do this twice, once with the anti-lock brake system and once without it. The second time you brake, it's much more controlled to demonstrate how the ABS works. The next test, which was 8-year-old me's favorite part of the ride, is the environmental test. Your vehicle goes through 3 rooms, the first one being the heat test to see how your vehicle performs in high temperatures. The room gets really hot, and then the same is done in the next room, but the opposite, and the room gets freezing cold. Then in the next room, it's the corrosive test, where acid is sprayed onto your vehicle to see how it performs, but in reality, it's just water. The next test is where you really start to pick up the pace, where you increase in speed to test handling and lateral forces by going through a series of twists and turns. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for, the speed test. You accelerate towards a barrier and it opens up last second, sending you outside. You then lap around the building, increasing in speed until you hit 65 miles per hour. You then slow down, thus concluding the ride, adding a grand finale to one of Epcot's signature attractions. Or should I say former signature attractions, because in 2012 the ride was overhauled to modernize the attraction and shift its focus to Chevrolet instead of the more broad General Motors. And I will say, as a kid I loved Test Track 1.0, but what kid wouldn't unless they are scared of rides or something like that? But it's hard for me to give a review because of how young I was. But from what I remember and from seeing a POV, this thing absolutely rocks. Upon transitioning to 2.0, the ride's theme was changed to be a digital simulation. Think of something like Tron thematically, where riders would customize their own ride vehicle before testing it on the sim track. Everything in the queue was modernized and it looked futuristic and fancy. Gone were the days of car parts and test dummies, and instead we had a glorified car dealership in one of the biggest glow downs of all time. So what was the ride experience like after the massive downgrade? Well, let's start with the car designer. Guests created their own vehicles in the queue and had many different car parts to choose from. You try to customize it to perform the best on the sim track, and this was tracked by your magic band. Now, I really don't like Test Track 2.0, but this is not a half bad idea. It could have been executed better, and I feel like most of the time I'd be looking at the stats from the vehicle in front of or behind me. One thing I would like to mention is that the car customization section replaced the pre-show, so there's really no pre-show anymore. Alright, so let's just fast forward to the ride because there's really nothing interesting about the station other than the ride vehicles no longer looking industrial but more cyber-ish. The ride again begins with a hill climb, but you'll immediately notice the #1 main issue with Test Track 2.0. Everything has been replaced by a screen. That may be an exaggeration, and thematically it makes sense, but when you compare it to the practical effects of Test Track 1.0, there's really no comparison. The first real test is the capability test to see how your vehicle performs under harsh conditions. The cold is no longer simulated by actually making you cold, but instead it's snow symbols and blue screens. Real immersive, guys. After your vehicle skids due to some off-roading during a storm, you get your test results on a screen. Now, when this worked properly, I really enjoyed seeing how my vehicle and other people in my car's vehicle performed. This is easily the saving grace of Test Track 2.0 other than the speed test, but that's kind of hard to mess up. Then move on to the eco test, which is a bit of a nothing burger. Your vehicle gets scanned to see how capable its systems are or something like that. Then you pick up the pace a bit and see the automated responsiveness of your vehicle with twists and turns. You then dodge your way out of a semi-truck, which happens in 1.0 as well. Then you go to the speed test, which is basically the exact same thing as before, just as awesome as ever. A great finale to an otherwise mediocre attraction. So that's Test Track 2.0, and as much flack as I give it, I still had fun on it. It may sound like I hate the ride, and while I definitely don't love it, any ride that goes 65 miles per hour can't be unenjoyable. It was just a huge downgrade. After 11 years, even Disney knew this thing needed a refresh, so along with new Epcot, Test Track 3.0 would focus more on an optimistic look at the future of technology. In July of 2025, Disney opened Test Track a third time, and it was reverted back to the General Motors sponsorship from 1.0 and World of Motion. Unfortunately, the queue is almost just as boring as Test Track 2.0, but there are some educational signs around the queue with some demonstrations to go along with them to explain and educate us on the environment, which I do appreciate. You head towards the station and notice that the car building section is gone, replaced with basically nothing. The station and the area before it are kind of empty. Quick anecdote here, but I had very low expectations for 3.0, especially after waiting in the queue and seeing how similar it was to 2.0. So you can imagine my surprise when I got off the ride, amazed at how awesome it was. But anyway, you board your vehicle and off you go. The ride starts out again with the hill climb, but then drops you into a neighborhood. I was instantly reminded of Spaceship Earth here, which is always a good sign. 3.0 actually features two narrators, one of them being AI and the other being a human. The AI then wants you to see the world through her eyes, and everything instantly becomes digitized. You then get launched forward, almost getting hit by a car as you navigate the digital landscape. The next section of the ride shows you what a smart road would look like. You once again get propelled forward, and as you can tell by now, the atmosphere of 3.0 is vastly different from the previous two versions because you aren't really testing anything. It's more of a demonstration of the future of vehicles and transportation. Next, you pull up to a house and the narrators demonstrate what it would be like to customize your vehicle on a whim in your own home. You drive by a mirror and the narrators show you and your party in different vehicles that are changing on the fly. Then you take a pleasant scenic drive around the forest, which looks beautiful by the way. The drive is quite peaceful until you have to dodge your way out of a semi-truck, much like the previous two versions of Test Track. After all of that, you get a glimpse of a future city which is inspired by Walt Disney's original plans for Epcot. Seriously, this is one of my favorite details on any Disney ride ever. You are then propelled forward into the speed test, which again isn't really a test, it's more of a demonstration. You can see the World of Motion logo painted on the ground, and fun fact, I was actually there the day that this was painted back in September. You could always see this on the Disney Parks app, but they eventually added it. I remember the smell of paint as I looked down there to see the World of Motion logo, which was not there the day before. You then hit the top speed and the ride concludes in all of its glory. Test Track 3.0 proves that creativity is still alive and well at the Disney parks. All of the intricate details like the original Epcot model and the World of Motion references tell me that Disney still cares about creativity and Imagineering. I love the sets of the houses, especially the one that you go inside of, while your vehicle changes. It reminds me of classic Epcot and makes me think of Spaceship Earth. The Imagineers behind 3.0 absolutely understood the assignment when developing this attraction. The set design is awesome, I love the scenic drive through the forest, and I also love the narrators. They provide a humorous tone to the attraction which was never really there before. While the theming isn't really comparable to Test Track 1.0, I would like to imagine that this is what 2.0 would have been like if it was done right. Disney absolutely righted their wrongs with this attraction, cementing itself as one of my favorite rides in all of Florida. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for this deep dive on all three versions of Test Track. My deep dive on Dinosaur has over 10,000 views, which I never could have dreamed of, and we are halfway to 1,000 subscribers, which again I never could have imagined. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing. It'll do wonders for my channel growth and I would appreciate it greatly. One more thing before I head out, I'm doing a video responding to your hot takes, so if you have any Disney Parks hot takes, drop them below in the comments to be featured on my channel. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed and I'll see you in the next video.